listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
Welcome to another edition of the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. I'm your host, Femi Abebefe. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos. Mike, we got a lot going on in the National Football League, a lot going on in the sports world. Wow, how about the news that we saw this morning? Waking up here on the West Coast, I woke up bright and early, and all of a sudden I'm hearing that Dan Hurley's going to be the target for the Los Angeles Lakers in their head coaching search that has gone on for about a month or so. I mean, it's a little bit of a surprise, and also another lesson in maybe teams and agents perhaps using the media to get out certain messages out there, as we oftentimes see across the world of sports.
There's something wrong with me, because the first thing I thought about when I saw the Hurley news, I thought of Chrissy Montasante. And why would you put Hurley and Montasante together in the same thing? But to me, it was Reddick is become the sacrifice bunt. I mean, they all put him out there like he was going to be the guy. He was going to be the guy. And all of a sudden, here comes Dan Hurley, who's been the guy all along. I mean, you know, poor Chrissy had to be holed up in some shitty hotel somewhere. You know, he's the obvious sacrifice bunt. You know, when they had that big dinner there, you know, at the Vesuvio, looked pretty good, that dinner too there. Actually, I think Artie was on his game that night. But anyway, yeah, I mean, look, this NIL stuff, it's not going to be the last college coach who wants to go to the NBA. This NIL stuff is going to drive them all crazy. It really is. I'm shocked Coach Cal hasn't gone there. And the way they're paying NBA coaches now, I mean, they're getting huge money. I mean, thanks to Monty Williams and that deal, so God bless him. Go. What else more can he do in Storrs, Connecticut? Why not go out and live in Playa del Rey? Why not? You know, go to Manhattan Beach, hang out. Not bad. Take a lot of that to kill you, I can tell you that.
Yeah, no, obviously it's a lot of taxes in California, but he'll be paid very handsomely if he takes that job. Right now, the reports are that he is being targeted by the Los Angeles Lakers, and like you mentioned, he apparently has been the number one target since the beginning of this coaching search, in which we have not heard his name until literally this morning. I mean, they interviewed J.J. Reddick, they interviewed, I believe, James Borrego, like all these coaches that they've interviewed. I think they interviewed Mike Inori, the T-Wolves assistant coach that was filling in for Chris Finch when Finch tore his patella tendon. Like, they've interviewed all these coaches, but here it is. It's Dan Hurley. Now we'll see if they ultimately close the deal. Apparently, it's a full court press, according to Adrian Wojnarowski, on the Dan Hurley front here. But I think it's a fascinating story. Just that was my first thought, Michael. Like, I saw the tweets and I said, did Shams get played like a fiddle? Is that what's going on here in terms of this head coaching search? Because I think it's very fascinating, the dynamics that are working behind the scenes. And apparently, it's Dan Hurley for the Los Angeles Lakers. We'll keep our eyes on that. But I think it's a really fascinating story.
A lot of fiddling going on out there, Femi. A lot of fiddling. You know, we're in the it's a perfect word. We're in the fiddle time of the year. We're getting stories put out by everybody. This guy's great, that guy's great, this guy's doing great, this minicamp's good. Yeah. It's fiddle time. I mean, it's everybody's great. There's no pads on. This is when Darren Waller's the greatest tight end in the history of the league.
Yeah, speaking of playing music, I mean, he's got his rap
retirement. And then he put out a rap song about it, you know, and it's like, okay, you've been retired, dude. You know, you've been retired. Your longest pass play last year was 31 yards. The only reason nobody's talking about it is because they gave up a third-round pick. They don't want to get embarrassed. Speaking of third-round picks, the news that blew me away, and I know you're the point guard here, but screw it. I'm going to try to hog the ball for a second.
Hey, go ahead and do your thing.
Like, the one that just has blown me away that is this Robert Saleh hasn't even talk to Haason Reddick. So, let's just take a moment here. And when you have good press and you have really good press coverage and people don't challenge you, which the great Joe Douglas never gets challenged. I mean, never. I mean, he gets A's in every draft. His team sucks, but he never gets challenged, right? They got a great team. He's untouchable. You can't go near him. But here's one that I think he's got to answer for, that he's going to have to stand up and figure out, if you're really a general manager, how did you let this happen to you? And Howie Roseman just bitch slapped him. Okay, so here we go. Bryce Huff, you and I said it on this pod. We knew the Eagles were going after Bryce Huff. I didn't say it was the Eagles initially. I just said there was a team that thinks they have a deal done with them. I knew it was the Eagles. I just didn't want to rat them out, right? Yeah. I wasn't going to rat them out. And so, you know, I know that, and I know that before the franchise tags come out. I know this, right? And so if I know it and I'm sitting here in little old Ocean City freezing my ass off in the middle of February, how does Big Joe Douglas sitting up there in Florham Park not know this, right? So if you know it, right, you say to your owner, look, you say to your owner, Woody, I'm going to tag this dude. And Howie's going to give me whatever the fuck I want for him because Howie's been talking about trading for this guy, wanting this guy on his team since last November. Mm-hmm. That's all they've talked about inside that building is how much they wanted Bryce Huff. Okay, so we won't pay a nickel to the guy, and then I'll be able to get a draft pick more than a compensatory pick that I'm going to get because I'm going to end up using money to sign some players too, which will offset the compensatory. So if I tag them, and then I deal with Howie. All right, he doesn't. Shocking that the Eagles sign him. So now he's 20 points down in the fourth quarter. He's got to trade a 3 and 26 or 26 to get Reddick, who wants a new contract, and he doesn't even work out the new contract with Reddick before he trades for him. Like most general managers would have said to Howie, look, I know the dude wants a new contract. I'm not trading for him unless I know I can get a new extension. I'm not giving you a third-round pick. I don't give a shit what year it's in until I know I can get a deal done with the guy. He trades for him blindly. So Howie just basically rips him off on Huff, and then Howie says, oh, here's a nice gift for you, Joe. You know, here's a beautiful gift. It stinks like that fish that Santino got in the room. You know, it stinks just like that, and you got to deal with Reddick's problem. Meanwhile, everybody tell me how great I am, Joe Douglas, as a general manager. Like, it makes no sense. And then, of course, the greatest born leader of all time, Robert Saleh, who's probably too busy playing golf to at least text Reddick to say, where the fuck are you, dude? It just drives me insane.
He's clanging and banging in the gym right now. And to your point, Rich Cimini, who covers the New York Jets for ESPN, says that Joe Douglas typically doesn't speak to the media during OTAs, but these are fair questions that somebody should ask Joe Douglas. And for the reference point, Haason Reddick has not attended any of the voluntary workouts for the Jets after being traded, which is not a massive deal. A lot of guys have been skipping out on voluntary stuff. But the point that he has not had any communication with Robert Saleh, that to me is the strange part of like, hey, you traded for this guy. There's no text message of, hey, welcome to the club. You know, we're excited to have you, man. Excited to get to work. Let's go ahead and get to the quarterback. Like, there was never any sort of communication whatsoever. Saleh said this at the press conference, said, quote, I'm focused on the guys who are here, and Haason's a pro. He's been in this league a while. He's produced it at a very high level for a long time. He's got his routine, and if it makes people feel better, we know where he's at, we know what he's doing, and we know he's working his tail off to get to where he needs to go to have a productive 2024 season. Once again, 1 year left on the contract, but you know where he's at, you know what he's doing. I guess there's no communication. I guess he doesn't want to, like, this is a new player on your team that is going to be a starter for your defense. You feel like you at least have some sort of communication and some kind of onboarding that we've talked about here entering a new team.
Well, we know he's unhappy too. So he wants a new contract. So like if we know all these facts, like, let's do something. It's not leadership. It's the absence of leadership. You know, now, look, I mean, I don't know what he does. I know he's being more involved with the offense, but who knows, right? I mean, we had Brian Costello on the show yesterday, and he was saying, look, I've heard that before about a defensive coach getting involved with the offense, but I have heard that Saleh's more involved with the Jets offense. I don't know what the hell that means. Like, I don't know what is he drawing up, smash 7 curls? He telling Nathaniel, I want to run bingo cross more often? I don't know, you know, but I do know that you know, the job of a general manager is to anticipate problems, not react. And you go ahead and you give Huff away. You could have got a pick for him. Howie would have easily given you a pick. But instead, you make Howie look like executive of the year the way he just bitch slapped you. And now all of a sudden he said, oh, here's my dead fish. You eat it.
Yeah. Traded for a guy that...
Wouldn't you think if the Eagles are trying to trade Reddick, wouldn't you say to yourself, call people around the league? They just lost their whole defensive staff, right? Like, call people, like, what's the problem with Reddick? Call all the guys. Find out what the hell, you know, they changed defenses. Like, what's going on there? Is there something wrong with the dude? You know, he wasn't the same player he was 2 years ago. What's happening? Is he getting too old? Instead, you go give up because you need him. I'll tell you, the 2 players they got rid of, Huff and Franklin Myers, those are the 2 of the best players, not counting Quentin Williams, the 2 best players in their defensive front. Everybody that I talk to in the league that look at the Jets saying, why'd they get rid of those 2 guys?
Yeah, and especially like we talked about it when it happened. You're getting older at that position. Maybe they didn't feel like Bryce Huff could be an every down player. Maybe that's why they went ahead and said, we'll just let him walk and the Eagles can pay him. But you instead of having Huff, who's 26, 27, now you're bringing on Haason Reddick, who's on the wrong side of 30 years old. Not to say that he can't have a productive season this year, but it seemed like a straight, like if you wanted to go ahead and acquire and have a pass rusher, you already had the guy in-house. Like why go ahead and do this thing with Haason Reddick, even if you felt like you had a good player in Bryce Huff? I think it's a weird deal, but it's the New York Jets, so weird and strange should not be out of the norm, I guess, when we analyze what they're up to.
That's the right line. It's weird, but it's the Jets. That's the perfect way. That's the perfect description.
It's the Jets. J-E-T-S.
All right, you go back to being the point guard.
All right. Well, let's talk about, because it's interesting that we see all these guys incurring the fines for missing mandatory minicamp, and the fine structure is as follows: first day $16K, second day $33,000, third day $50,000, to a total of about roughly $101,000, almost $102,000. And through the prism of CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Aiyuk, these guys, is this an effective strategy for gaining a contract and getting the extension that those two guys desire? We can, of course, carry the conversation on to the other side as well.
No, I mean, I think it's the stupidest thing ever. You're just giving away $100,000. Give it to St. Jude's. Give it to a charity. I mean, what are you doing? Like, just because you don't show up for minicamp, you think it's going to put, oh my God, it's going to put more pressure on you. Oh my God, I'm not here. It's going to put more pressure. I've got to sign. Jerry's probably sitting in Highland Park. Oh, I'm sweating my ass off. CeeDee Lamb's not here. Well, he don't give a shit. He could care less. He could care less. Nothing says I'm sorry, as the great Arnold Rothstein said. Nothing says I'm sorry better than money. I know I'll pay you, so you won't be mad at me for long. But why not? Why give $100,000 away? It's not moving the needle one way or the other. Holdouts, basically restricting work implies that you have to get something done. If a trash man goes on strike and your trash doesn't get picked up, there's residual effect of that shit, right? You're smelling it all over. The neighborhood's upset. Aiyuk holding out ain't gonna nobody upset. I mean, all those coaches are gonna go on vacation tomorrow and not think about it. Oh, was Aiyuk there? Who cares?
Yeah.
Now we get ready to start playing a game. They will, but that's $50K a day. It's the dumbest thing ever, and it doesn't move the needle. If I was an agent, I would say, get your ass in there. Don't give up the money. Now, I'm not telling you to go in there and work your ass off and get hurt. Just go in there and be a good guy.
Yeah, I'm just here so I don't get fined, is the advice that those players need to take.
Exactly.
Let's take a quick break here. This is the GM Show.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
So while CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Aiyuk are incurring fines for missing mandatory minicamp, once again, $101,000 for the full 3 days if they miss all three of them, the two reigning offensive players of the year of the past couple of years, Christian McCaffrey and Justin Jefferson, have signed new contracts. McCaffrey signing a 2-year, $38 million extension. He, of course, sits atop the running back market that now is set to earn $62.2 million over the next 4 years, which is an average of $15.5 million per season. Does this allow them to maybe free up some cap space for a potential Aiyuk deal? Because everything with the Niners that happens is, how does this work in context of Brandon Aiyuk wanting a new deal? Does this have anything to do with that, or is this them just re-upping and getting their best player offensively some new money?
Well, I think ultimately he had he can, they know he's a good player, right? So he's 20. He's still only 28 years old going into the season. And he had a 2-year deal, and then they just added 2 more years onto the deal, but they have where they can void it out, so they can spread out all the money so that the cap number for the next 2 seasons is $6.6 million, then it goes to 9.8, and then it goes to 9.7, and then the third year, when he's 31 years old, it balloons to 25.3. So what they're doing is they're getting everything in line before they got to play Brock Purdy. And when they pay Purdy, his cap number will be rather low. So, what I don't understand is why people just value the new money and they don't count the old, right? It's kind of interesting. He got new money, but then when you add the 4 years to the deal, look, McCaffrey at $15 million, he's a receiver too. I mean, the guy averages just slightly under 8 yards a catch. He's a huge part of their offense in terms of first downs running and first downs catching. So he's a weapon. And I think one of the biggest things about this deal is we need to separate running backs into categories. Who's a weapon and who's a runner? Because if you're just a runner, you're expendable to a degree, depending on the level of how good of a runner you are. But if you're a weapon in the passing game and a runner, all of a sudden you become a whole different player, because the idea of being a really good football team or being any good team is to be able to substitute without substituting. So that means you have multidimensional players that can play multiple positions and create the defense to have to react. So if McCaffrey's on the field with Juszczyk and they put him in the slot and you try to play base to that, you're going to have a tough matchup. If McCaffrey's on the field and he's in the backfield with Juszczyk and you play nickel to that, they're going to gain a little bit of an advantage, right? They can do it. And you're going to have to figure something out there. Or, if they have Debo on the field with McCaffrey and they put Debo in the backfield and they put McCaffrey outside and you want to play man to that, you got to declare it. Who's covering McCaffrey? See, all these scenarios, you got to sit in your office on Tuesday and say, okay, if Kyle moves this guy out, if he moves McCaffrey out and puts Debo in the backfield, how are we treating that? What are we going to do? We're just going to play, we're going to treat it like it normal and the linebacker's going to have Debo? Or we're going to switch it and the corner's going to come inside the box? That doesn't work. It becomes an issue. This is where I think we make a huge mistake, Femi, when we start talking about Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan and Matt LaFleur, Kyle Shanahan and Zach Taylor, Kyle Shanahan and all these guys that have come through there, right? Shanahan is like his father. He's extremely like his dad. His dad would show you early in the game 2 or 3 formations that you had to get ready for. And that was going to be the game plan. But you didn't know what they were. It's formational football in the Shanahan tree. In the other trees, it's more of a mix and match. And so the only guy that really understands formational football of the whole tree, including Sean does his thing, and Sean's really good.
Yeah.
And really creative. Slovic, same thing. He runs that, but he's not in the formational game the way Kyle is. Very few people know the formational game. I think it's just Kyle, frankly. Or Kyle's really never taught anybody the formational game. His dad taught him. And Kubiak a little bit to a degree, but not as much. That's where and so when he gets players like Christian who are multidimensional and he can move them around, that enhances his portfolio of formational football.
Yeah, and we know that McVay also has kind of tweaked the offense a little bit. Like when they acquired Matthew Stafford a couple of years ago, it wasn't the offense that they ran with Jared Goff. There's been some tweaking there, but it's a little bit different when you have Kyle Shanahan. And trading for Christian McCaffrey like they did 2 years ago is why. It's like he wanted to have this sort of versatility and flexibility to where the defense is always having to make that pre-snap declaration to where then they can go ahead and attack some of those rules defensively. You mentioned the old money and the new money and how we kind of don't really report on that. Well, that's also the case with Justin Jefferson, the all-pro wide receiver for the Minnesota Vikings. We talked about it on Monday. He signed the big deal, 4 years, 140. But when you factor in the fifth-year option, like that money doesn't just go away. The fifth-year option doesn't just, it's like, all right, like now we start on a 4-year deal and there's no fifth-year option. They still factor that in. So it's when you put that in, the $19.7 million, it's essentially a 5-year, $159.7 million deal, which if you put that over the annual average, that's $31.92 million per year. So it's not as gaudy as it seemed when it's just 140, but it's still obviously a really big contract, but it's not the resetting the non-QB market, and it's still Nick Bosa atop that one there for the Niners.
Yeah, I mean, and really what it is, he has a potential out in 2028, so it's a 4-year deal at 125. Okay, or it's a 5-year deal at 159. I mean, so if you're Jerry Jones and you're looking at this deal, you say to yourself, look, CeeDee Lamb, if you want this deal, I'll take your $17.2 million that I owe you this year, and I'll put 140 onto it, and we'll split it up by 5. I'll guarantee 90 million of it. Here you go. Right? Mm-hmm. And so you can go out and tell everybody you're the highest paid non-quarterback, but at the end of the day, the numbers say it's 5 years, 159. That's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at, because I was going to pay this money anyway. Like, it's not going away. I didn't rip up the deal and start over. If I would have ripped up the option year, okay, and said, okay, Jefferson, you're getting 4 years, 140. Now that's $35 million a year. Mm-hmm. I get that. But he didn't do that. He kept the year, and he added 4 more at 140. But he kept the year. That goes into it. Like, for some reason, I don't understand, but I know why. It's because the agents can sell it as I'm the highest paid non-defensive player.
Yeah, it's marketing
for the teams.
agents.
They're looking at it as you're a 5-year, $31.9 million.
Yeah, it's definitely marketing for the agents to go ahead and be able to say that. And when they're going ahead and try to sign new clients coming out of college, this is where you can point to if you're an agent. If I was an agent, I'd do the same thing. So I'm not even like blaming them for doing it, but that's kind of the reading between those two things. It's like they never ripped up that contract. And for Justin Jefferson, well worth it. I mean, he is an all-pro offensive player of the year a couple of years ago. Still had 1,000 yards after missing 7 games this past season. It goes to show you what kind of player he is in that offense. For VSiN.com, Michael, you wrote about the Miami Dolphins, and we wanted to highlight that here on this pod before we wrap things up here. The Miami Dolphins and Tua in particular. A photo of Tua Tagovailoa over at OTAs spurred this for you here. You think the Tua losing the weight and slimming down might be a bad deal for him and this Dolphins team as a whole? I mean, obviously there's a lot more at play here, Fangio and all that stuff, but why did this Tua photo really kind of spark the idea for you to write about the Dolphins?
You know, they say a picture paints 1,000 words. That's from an advertisement from a Peak, Ohio, back in the early 20th century. You know, and so and they use that, and it's become kind of a line we all use. But it just dawned. I looked at it and I was startled. Like, you know, he was healthy last year. He played in every game. His team wasn't healthy around him at times, but he did. And so for me, I'm like, why would he change? And I've heard some things, and none of them are provable, that, you know, there's stuff going on down there. Personally, I don't know what to make of any of it. I just know that he lost weight, and he's due to make a lot of money. And he said it the other day in the interview, and I think he was right. He said, look, the market dictates what I'm going to get paid. He's right. Mm-hmm. You know, we get so caught up in what we think the player's worth. The market tells you that. If you're going to pay a starting quarterback, the market is this. Here's what you're getting. Same thing happens in general managing. If Joe Douglas gets $6 million a year, and that's the market for first-time general managers, that's the market, okay? So if you're a first-time GM and Joe Douglas gets this, and he's not won any Super Bowls being a GM, that's the market. It's the same thing with Tua. You could say he's not worth $55 million, but that's what he's going to get. And he used that terminology perfectly. So I think that's the case. But then when you peel back the layer, like, how's he going to stay healthy? 77% of the offense goes to the receivers in terms of targets and in terms of catches. Tyreek Hill's, like I tweeted out, you know, his phone's, you know, his agent's calling right now. He knows it. But I think deeper down, what I don't think people understand is the Vic Fangio effect. And I think this has a residual effect to it. Because if you study the Dolphins, and I know 2 years ago Tua got hurt, they're 4-10 from week 13 with Mike McDaniel on. They're 4-10, okay? And they have faded the second half of the season. And if you listen to what the comments are coming from Vic Fangio's people, one of them I put in the article, Ron Jaworski, who's a friend of Vic, is they didn't think they practiced hard enough. They didn't think there was enough accountability. It wasn't too much to do in Florida, which is what I say all the time. Right? I say it all the time. If you're the GM of the Miami Dolphins, you better draft guys that love football. Because let me tell you, if you're a young professional athlete in South Beach, there's a lot of shit to do, and it just ain't eating stone crabs. You know? And so you got to have guys committed to it. And when you look over 2 years with Mike, they're 4-10 from week 13 on. That's not just because of injuries. That's because of maybe they're just not all buying in. And then you read the comments of players being happy that Vic left, because he was too hard on him. It was too demanding. He's too old school. There's something there, man. You can't fudge that. Like, if you want to be a champion, you have to be old school. You got to work hard. You got to put the hours in. You got to do what's right. And whether you do it the way Andy Reid does it, or the way you do it the way Bill Belichick does it, or the way you do it the way the Atlanta Falcons have done it for years and winning all their Super Bowls, however you do it, right? And so you have to. But to me, I think that was just, to me, it was the tip of the iceberg. It painted 1,000 words, and that's what I wrote about.
Well, we saw Javon Holland, their safety, earlier to say that, like, it sounds like they just didn't like Vic Fangio, like the person. I don't know if they clashed personality styles. Clearly, that's probably what happened. But I mean, I don't know how to kind of balance.
He was accountable.
Yeah. Maybe that's
well,
what
he was
is.
accountable. When the players, they love him, but all the players in Philly love him. Do you see Jordan Davis?
Yeah.
How about all those? You see that?
Yeah, Jordan
because
Davis.
the head coach doesn't have any accountability. The head coach he don't care about the defense. He don't care about the space. He calls offensive plays. He is a subcontractor. So there was no support from him. Yeah. This will be his third defensive coordinator in 3 years.
That's usually not a good sign. Miami Dolphins, though, they're still one of the contending teams. We'll wrap up that conversation on the other side. This is the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
So with a new defensive coordinator and a culture that's in place in Miami that has won regular season games but has not had the postseason success, I guess what is your outlook on the Dolphins heading into this 2024 season? Do you see this as a team that maybe goes under the win total of 9.5, or do they kind of get to that number there and then once again kind of flame out in the postseason in January?
I mean, if the quarterback can stay healthy and the receivers have to stay healthy, like I said, 77% of the balls go to the receiver, 48% of the targets. Now, they signed the tight ends. Last year, the tight ends had like 41 targets. They had 10% of the catches and less than 10% of the targets, so they weren't even involved. But they signed Juju Smith, who gives them a vertical presence. I think they just want more speed. That's all they care about is more speed. Can they hold up front?
Yeah.
I mean, Armstead doesn't even practice in minicamp. I mean, they can't even get him in minicamp. I mean, and if they start to get hit, see, what I don't think people realize is when you watch them, go back to week 7 with the Eagles stoned them. The Eagles killed them because the Eagles understood defensively how to play them. And I think when they play against good teams, even Dallas understood how to play them. They gave up 22 points, but they understood how to play them. It's an RPO system. The ball's going to certain locations. Now, it's really hard to stop them. I'm not minimizing their talent or calling their scheme, insulting their scheme, because I'm not. I think they do exactly what you have to do when you have great talent. Keep it simple and make the defense stop you. But the 2 Kansas City games, I mean, they couldn't do shit against Kansas City in both games. They couldn't do anything against them. And the Jets really controlled them. Of course, they shut out the Jets 30-0. They were able to win that game. But I think the Jets are closer to them. I actually think the Jets are a better team than they are. I'm not saying the Jets are better coached than they are because I think McDaniels does a better job offensively. But I'm worried about, you bring Beckham in and you start to, you're adhering to what the players want. And there's got to be a sense of, I'm not trying to make it a dictatorship, but there's got to be a sense of accountability. And I think when Vic left, because of it. Look, I never thought the Vic and McDaniel marriage was ever going to work. That's like two opposites. You almost want to play the Odd Couple music when they come in, but I know Anthony Weaver's got his work cut out for him because if you look at the 1 year he was the defense coordinator in Houston, it wasn't very good. Now, the team wasn't good either, but Anthony Weaver's a front 7 coach. He's not a back 7 coach. And they hired Joe Barry. They gave him the run game coordinator title, but Joe Barry's supposed to be the back end. But Joe Barry plays a lot of Tampa. You have Jalen Ramsey. You're playing Tampa. That's almost a waste. So I think to me, it's a fascinating conversation about have they improved defensively? They fired Boyer. Boyer was the reason that they got rid of Flores, and then they come back with, and then they fire Boyer. They come back with Vic. Vic's not happy. That's 2 defensive coordinators. Like what are we doing here? What are we doing? And who's really making the hires? Is Chris Greer hiring Anthony Weaver and Joe Barry, or is it Mike McDaniel? I don't know. Joe Barry, I'm sure that Mike McDaniel and Matt LaFleur talked. I don't think Big Daddy was involved, but I'm sure they talked. And, they decided what they were going to do.
Yeah, there's no way Big Daddy was involved in those discussions. I don't think so.
He did not sign off on that hire. No, he did not.
He did not. Based on the text message,
I don't know if he signed off on Dan Hurley going to the Lakers either, but we'll see how he works on that.
Maybe Hurley did the
Knicks.
He's
probably petitioning to get Thibodeau's contract revoked.
Well, the money's not coming out of his pocket, so he can go ahead and do those things.
You think it is, though, actually.
Yeah, maybe. Shout out to our guy, Big Daddy. The Miami Dolphins, we'll keep an eye on them all throughout the course of this offseason. I think it's an interesting team. And defensively, in the front 7 in particular, they have those injuries with Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips. Have to get those guys back healthy. I would not anticipate that they're there week 1, given the severity of the injuries and when they took place in the back half of the regular season. Before we go, obviously sad news in the NFL world here. Dallas Cowboys Hall of Fame offensive lineman Larry Allen passing away on a family vacation in Mexico at the age of 52. Obviously, this was a shock to the entire football world. I remember growing up watching those Cowboys. Those are the teams that made me fall in love with football. And Larry Allen was the cornerstone of that offensive line. And this news obviously hit everybody hard when it came out earlier this week. But just your thoughts on Larry Allen, the life that he lived, and obviously a football legend in his own right.
Well, he's everything that I love about football. He dominated the game from the offensive line position. He was physical. He set the tempo for their team. They ran the ball behind him. I mean, Madden, you play some of those videos of Madden talking about him. And look, we did a lot of work on him coming out in the draft. We learned through him that, test scores don't matter, that if you could teach a player what to do, a player may not score high on a certain test, but he's smart enough to play football. We sent Pat Hill out there when I was in Cleveland on a Monday. Pat Hill, the former head coach of Fresno State, he worked as our assistant line coach and worked in the personnel department. Went out there, spent a day with Larry out at Sonoma State, left, went somewhere else, came back on Thursday, and basically wanted to know what Larry knew, and he did. He was really good at it. And so, look, the guy could play anywhere in the offensive line. He was physical. He was dominating. He could run. I mean, it was just truly, he was fun to watch. And after 1 year, you could have said, that guy's going to Pro Bowl. I mean, that guy's going to Hall of Fame. You could just tell that guy was that dominant. And the only reason he was at Sonoma State was because of academics. That was it.
Yeah. 11 Pro Bowls, 6 All-Pros, member of the All-Decade team for the 1990s and the 2000s. So that's the longevity of his career, going to the Hall of Fame in 2013, but gone at the age of 52. Obviously, a very sad time. Thoughts to Larry Allen's family and loved ones and former teammates and friends. Obviously, we've seen a lot of the tributes pouring in from a lot of those star players from the Dallas Cowboys from the 90s. Tragic news there in the world of football. We hate to end it on a sad note, but we just wanted to make sure we got that in and mentioned that, since that's big news in our world, and it broke Monday right after we did our podcast. We will see you guys on the other side of the weekend on Monday. We have a fun interview on deck for you guys once again here on the GM Shuffle. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Thank you to our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos. Michael, I'll talk to you on Monday.